Every career story has two parts, the leap and what comes after. Today's guest made both count. He began his in Pakistan, trained as a chartered accountant. Soon after made the move to Canada where he worked across some of the country's top organizations. Think of Canada Bread, IMAX, Brookfield, Pepsi, Accenture, and more. In this podcast, we'll go through his journey and why and how it led him to consulting at Accenture and consulting for his own entrepreneurial services. Mustafa, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Ammar, thank you so much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, Mustafa, I know quite a bit about you. Do you mind giving a bit of context about yourself to the audience?
For sure. So as you've rightly said, I was born in Pakistan, moved to Canada a few years ago. I've been fortunate to be working in the finance and treasury space for a number of years, not only in Canada, but across North American continent and even globally. So I've worked with, as you've identified, the companies like Pepsi and Accenture and all that have offered me the opportunity to work pretty much globally. So I say that I am fortunate to have worked across all 6 continents, not the 7th one, 6 continents.
Yes. No, thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's very cool, some of the opportunities that could arise from working in several different places. How have you felt the culture shift between work, specifically work-life balance was in all those different continents?
Certainly. So when I was moving from Pakistan to Canada, initially, that was way back when probably you weren't even born then, Ammar. What I felt was that my biggest challenge wasn't technical. Technically, I was strong. I was a chartered accountant. I knew things and all that. But my biggest learning was in the areas of communication and expectations. Back home, things work more like a hierarchical type of thing, versus here, you're expected to speak up ideas and actively, proactively get engaged. So that was the shift that I had. So for me, the real shift was going from just focusing on doing things right versus making sure that I'm the one who's driving the outcome. And once I got comfortable with that, things became easier. And this is what I see today in my work experiences. A lot of people underestimate this piece. They don't know how long does it take. Is it just first job? Sometimes it could even take a few years for you to figure out how to operate effectively in the North American context.
Oh, definitely. And I appreciate that answer. I feel even looking at the way my parents go about work in comparison with me, I see a very similar thing where they're very, very strong technically. They understand the finance, they understand HR. Whereas for me, perhaps I am very pertinent upon the whole leadership, entrepreneurial side of things, but it's a very nice dichotomy to have. And I think both sides definitely have their strong suits. And then pushing forward to my next question is going to be almost around the idea of how you've had finance roles and treasury roles at IMAX, Brookfield, Pepsi, and those are some very, very big companies. But then you decided to make the leap into consulting, specifically at Accenture. What made you decide to take that leap, and why did you go into consulting specifically?
Great question. So for me, this was a natural progression, Ammar, because in my industry roles, I was always focused on specific areas like treasury, liquidity, finance, working capital, and all that. But over time, I found myself getting more interested in the bigger picture. How all these pieces connect together across the organization. Consulting gave me that opportunity. You're not only looking at one function now, but you're stepping back and helping solve the business problem, broader business problem. And I really like that idea of having that kind of an impact across different companies, different industries, and all that. And the best part about this job is that it's more about people. Aligning stakeholders, managing expectations, not just the analysis part, not just the technical part, but how do you bring people along with you?
Right. 100%. I think that's perhaps what drew me into consulting the most. The fact that now I'm in a position where I get to talk to people and I get to ideate with them, build my communication skills, and just grow personally and professionally alongside other people. To be very frank with you, when it came to engineering and perhaps more so the software side, I really like the fact that you can build things through a technical prowess. However, At the same time, I didn't like how it was almost isolated. You know, you're alone, you're building things on your own. I really like the people's aspect of consulting, and I truly, truly, truly say this, not even in an interview setting. I truly just say it, how it's great to be working with some very smart people. Some would say solving some of the smartest problems.
Correct.
And I think working alongside other people always pushes you forward. Now,
100%.
the next question I want to ask is specifically keeping in mind of your financial and accounting background. What gave you that edge when it came to consulting? And what else would you encourage people with a background in accounting who want to push forward into consulting specifically?
For sure. So accounting definitely helped. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But may not be in the ways that most people think of accounting as. So I'll be
Interesting.
honest with you on that. It's not just about knowing the numbers. It's more about how you start to think. So what accounting provided me was a structure, a discipline, understanding how things actually would flow. Like, we say in accounting, debits and credits should always be equal. That's the structure, right? So that's the very logical way of thinking. But where it really shows up now is in your judgment, like being able to spot the risks early, like asking better questions, connecting those decisions back to the financial impact. And that's where it becomes really more valuable that, yes, you actually understand the problem from the grassroots level.
How do you go about solving those complex financial or even strategy problems?
That's a fantastic question. So for me, first thing that I do is I do not jump into conclusions hard for some people. A-type personalities. Yes, I know the answer. I can get to it right away, but I do not. First thing is I step back and really understand where the problem is. What's actually driving it? What are the constraints? Who's involved? From where? From this, based on this information, then I like to break it down into smaller pieces. What's within control, and there are things sometimes that are not under control, right? Where can we create momentum sooner so that these things can drive? And then the important part is communicate. It's aligning with the stakeholders, bringing the solution. So carrying out those workshops type of things, this is my favorite part of consulting, that I like to bring all people together. And that's where I understand, okay, it's a mix of the structure and then listening, adapting, and then obviously thinking through, because of the experience that I've gained over the years, this could be the right solution. And usually this is where the solution comes out. And that's what I love about solving problems.
100%. It seems that this entire umbrella that you're explaining almost can be categorized as working capital, right?
Indeed.
And what I want to ask about that is, working at such high level brands and companies, what do you think companies almost get wrong about working capital, about this umbrella that you just described?
Right. So oftentimes working capital, like say large companies, I've worked across not only large, but say SMBs as well, these medium organizations. So a lot of times companies would calculate, they would have the theoretical knowledge of working capital. These are the DSOs, DPOs and all that. But what they miss is that having it embedded in managing their day-to-day decision making. So the reality is working capital is very operational. It's not a finance metric. It's driven by things like how you manage your inventory, how you negotiate your payment terms, how disciplined your processes are. So what I see in my current work is the companies that do it well are the ones who connect this with finance and business.
Interesting.
Connected together, working together. And that makes the operations well. And in some cases, what I've seen, even small improvements, just like, say, tightening your receivables or adjudicating your customers right, or better inventory planning, can free up a significant amount of cash for companies.
100%. Now, this might sound as an interesting question. How would you categorize a business? And I'll give you an example of what I would say. Perhaps there would be the sales, there would be marketing, there would be the strategy, operations, the financial aspects. Maybe you can throw in like supply chain / logistics. But how would you categorize a business and almost all its superpowers?
So see, at the end of the day, I wear the entrepreneur's hat. I
Mm-hmm.
treat the business as if I'm the entrepreneur. What is my bottom line? If I'm the owner, and this is what led me into, say, founding I Consult businesses, is think like an entrepreneur. Oftentimes, the way we work is we end up creating those little silos. And that's where the consultant's role becomes more important. They cut through the silos like this. And this is where they're able to make a difference. And that's how I see it. I don't see a company with supply chain and procurement and finance and sales.
I
I
see.
see them as this whole operation this is my product, this is what I'm selling. How do I
Mm-hmm.
make sure that this is the best way of getting it to the customer and with the best possible price, with the best possible margin for myself? And
Of course, that's interesting. I think it makes a lot more sense in the sense that within consulting, you're almost supposed to have a north star of the problem itself. No matter what area you get into, whatever exhibits you might ask for, whatever graphs that you see, you need to keep in mind that the bottom line is, for example, increase profitability with iPad. And it's very interesting how all these different functions can help increase the profitability, whereas at times you might just think to yourself, well, it's just revenue and cost, just cut down the wages, which is what a lot of people might say. But it's so much more than that. It could
indeed,
come into the supply chain aspects, could come into sales. There's this very interesting quote that I came across. I will be paraphrasing it. I haven't memorized it, but
notice
essentially the quote goes along the lines of, the only reason you need to focus on sales is because your marketing isn't good. The only reason you need to focus on marketing is because your product isn't good, which was very astonishing to me because as a person who really likes marketing, really
right.
likes sales,
Mhm.
even for KKC Classroom, like the application that I'm currently building with some of my closest friends, I found that I used to focus on the marketing aspects a little too much rather than just focusing on making the product better. Because at the end of the day, when the product is better, when the product is amazing, word of mouth marketing will carry it so much farther than any sort of marketing that I do, any meta ads that I pay for, Instagram ads, whatever else there might be. What's your thought process on that quote specifically? What comes to your mind?
100% agreed with that quote, Ammar, because what you rightly said is the product should speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to talk about, say, the software that you just example that you cited, the software should be able to solve the customer's problems that they currently
Mm-hmm.
have. If
Mm-hmm.
we talk about, say, consultant, the consultant should be able to provide something that the company did not think about or did not have a way of solving. So same thing, the product should be able to speak for itself first. That's the foremost thing. Yes, marketing helps. Yes, sales helps push it forward. But that doesn't mean that we lose that what we call the edge is definitely the product and service by itself first.
How do you find the differentiation between, of course, it's very clear what the difference is, but how do you balance the differentiation between strategy and implementation, especially with I Consult businesses, but even in your roles at Pepsi or Accenture?
Certainly. So, very good question. See, and this is what I actually learned coming to Accenture. Accenture is very good. One of my bosses used to say, "We are not solutioning right now." Favorite quote, "We are not solutioning right now. Let's throw the idea." So, strategy is more about that. First, what you've said the right word, the true North Star. North Star should be defined clearly first. This is what we want to achieve. And then implementation is something that follows that. But sometimes what we do is even when, say, sales or marketing, we create a software and we start selling it. We try
Yeah.
to market it right away, right? Without really knowing what actually the purpose of this software is, or what am I doing. So when I started, like, say, consulting business, my first challenge was similar. What am I consulting? What problem am I solving for people, right? As Simon Sinek, I don't know if you know of this author or not. He talks about what problem am I solving today, right? That's the first thing that you
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, and that's where the strategy comes in. Once you've set up your strategy, yes, this is what I want to do. Then the implementation piece comes in, follows it. Strategy first, implementation second.
Interesting. That's very interesting. You know what surprises me is how your manager mentioned how you should just start throwing ideas first and then start to decide, okay, the pros and cons of each one, then create a solution from there. Oftentimes, whether it's me thinking about the growth or the future of KKC Classroom, what I honestly think about is if I throw an idea, how viable is it straight off the bat?
Right.
Which, now that I'm thinking about it, may not be the best way to go about things, because you can have hundreds of ideas and you might waste your time, going step by step by step by step in a sequential order. Whereas maybe if you throw 10 different ideas, you could start to pick out whatever you think is the best one and then go in that order rather than just going whatever is the first thing that pops into your mind.
Correct.
So thank you very much for sharing that. That's very helpful. On top of that, how would you recommend? So kudos to you. You're someone who was in the corporate space and now in the entrepreneurship space. A, what's the biggest challenge that you faced? And B, what is some advice you'd give to someone else who wants to make that switch between going from corporate to entrepreneurship?
Good one. So two things. One, technical side is there. Like I'll say that again. I've said this technical side is there. Technically, yes, strong. It's more about working through complexity, especially when the multiple stakeholders are involved. Everyone comes with a different priority. Everyone comes with different pressures in life. And the biggest part of a consultant's job is to figure out on how to bring alignment. How do we get everyone moving in the same direction without oversimplifying the problem? So that's the most important, without oversimplifying the problem. And what I've realized is it's not always about having the perfect answer. It's about asking the right questions and helping the group move forward. So we were talking about people skills earlier, right? So it's more about how you bring people together to a solution where everyone together, as we say, right, in team, together everyone achieves more. So that's what the goal is. That's the biggest challenge that I solve every day, all day.
I see. Within businesses, let's say they decide to take the step in aligning their team to the goal in a better manner. How are you, as a consultant, able to help them streamline that in a more effective manner?
So aligning your team to a better goal is what you said?
Yes. So, for example, making sure that everyone understands the goal and the tasks are put in place, the culture is still there, even from a strategic lens, everything is aligned.
Correct. Communication. That's the biggest piece. As I say, 3 C's: communication. When people are sold out to the goal, so coming back to your previous question that you said strategy first, implementation second, right? So when the strategy is set with a goal and people are sold out onto that goal, it becomes easier for everyone to follow that. Oftentimes, what I've seen is the top brass, when they come up with, this is the project, they start implementing it right away. And people are like completely confused about how are we, why are we doing this? We still have questions. And that tells me that no, the communication piece did not happen as effectively. So again, coming back to the workshops example, which I love, that helps. This is what we want to do. This is why we are doing it. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any concerns?
Interesting.
Can we do it in a better way? Is what my question always is. How can we do it better? And oftentimes people are like, here's an idea. And we gather 4 or 5 ideas, make things better. Because alone, I cannot think of everything. I know for sure.
No, that's very profound. I currently have a course and I gave almost the final exam for it a week ago, where it's organizational behavior. And it's very interesting how applicable that is in the real world setting, where even I face this a lot with KKC Classroom, KKC Consulting, 180 Degrees Consulting, like the pro bono consulting organization I'm the president of. A lot of the times you have to sell the vision to the people, and you can't. To me, it was very surprising. Just for a bit of context, in first year, I released a LinkedIn post stating, KKC Consulting is hiring interns for the summer.
Okay.
And thankfully, around 700 people applied. So to me, I was like, wow, that's
Wow.
for 700 people are okay with working under a 17, 18-year-old. That's impressive. But what I didn't think about is it's very hard for you to quantify how much work a person does. And the closest way you can do that is how much they're sold to the vision, which is something
Exactly.
that I'm finding out as a first-time founder as well.
Mhm.
Within my team, at first, I was very of the opinion that we should keep a very massive team where
Right.
it's, 15 different people who are doing all sorts of tasks, but that's not the wisest decision in, I would say, 90% of the time, right? Like for me, the way that I would actually look at it is rather than having 15 people who, each of them you give a small task and you expect something very small, rather what I've found as a first time founder is even having a team of 2 to 3 people who are
Mhm.
highly specialized, who are highly driven in the mission is oftentimes much better. And another aspect that really surprised me is how money isn't everything. Money isn't everything when it comes to work. Often, I'll be very upfront. I don't pay anyone who works on KKC. I'm a student, but what I've seen is that they genuinely just believe in the mission of helping students break into consulting and finance roles in a much more affordable manner. They truly
Correct.
believe in it, and they believe in thinking of different ways that they can solve things. They see how a consulting lens actually fits into entrepreneurship. A mentor of mine oftentimes says consulting is the entrepreneurship of jobs, right? Which I
Yes.
agree with heavily because you're almost taking a
Right.
step back. You're looking, you have your North Star, and then from there you start to decide my initial hypothesis is this. I say this because of X, Y, and Z. Now, I want to transition this because maybe of this, or I think we should go forward with this solution, which is very
Yeah.
similar with entrepreneurship, where, like you mentioned, throw on the wall a bunch of solutions you might have, you pick up one out, whatever you think is the most viable, and then just proceed from there. And it's very profound when you move in that area. And I also want to mention this will turn into a question shortly, how profound it was when I realized doing the action of just entrepreneurship, I learned so much more than just reading about it in a book. And it's similar to consulting, where I felt when I was consulting for actual businesses, whether they're my friends' businesses, a local pizza shop because I was bored, right?
Mhm.
I found out oftentimes I learned something new, interesting. Maybe, you know, in a mergers and acquisition, one thing you have to keep in mind is synergy. I never thought
Mhm.
synergy was important. I thought it was just the financials, right?
Mhm.
How have you felt that dissonance between actually doing the work and just reading or listening about the work has been for you?
For sure. So I think, Ammar, you've rightly said, it's like the other example is learning how to swim. You could read
Mm-hmm.
as many books on swimming, but if you do not get into the water, you can never
Mm-hmm.
swim, right? So same thing
100%.
applies. Same thing applies here. Being in a consulting company like say Accenture or EY for that matter is the closest thing you could get to experiencing entrepreneurship yourself. And then the next leap is
Interesting.
you become your own boss and be your own I consult businesses kind of
Right.
thing because you still get a paycheck. So you're not worried about that. But at the same time, you're thrown into problems, solving problems of various people, various companies,
Mm-hmm.
large companies, bigger companies, where you have to act really have to have your act together for
100%.
providing them the right piece of advice that they would be able to use and make a
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Now, with that, I want to ask, keeping in mind of your tenure in several different companies, several different industries, what have you found was the most challenging aspect of dealing with all of that? What have you found to be the most pertinent challenges?
So I think the biggest one was again going back to this first thing that I started with came from a hierarchical background structure. You have to have your own place before you speak up kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. To pivoting myself into okay, this is more about making a difference, driving
Mm-hmm.
results, and that is something that I saw I have learned over the years. One thing.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing is you got to reinvent yourself all the
Right.
time. It's not about that this is what I got educated in and this is what I would do. As you rightly see in my profile as well. I started as a chartered accountant, but now I'm a treasury professional. So I did after few years in finance, financial reporting and all that. I reinvented myself into treasury. Now is
Hmm.
the AI and agentic AI. So I'm into
Yes,
that now. Uh, Treasury alone cannot cut it. Yes, now you have to be keeping pace with what the technological movements are. And
hmm,
man, I'm so super excited how AI and agentics are transforming the industry and transforming the functions. I can't speak enough of that. It's such a great thing.
of course, of course. And it's that kind of leads me to my next question. At this stage, what excites you? What excites you to keep continuing I consult businesses or to push forward?
So my the biggest thing is making a difference. So I've gathered that experience over the number of years where finance, treasury, entrepreneurship, how a business actually is able to run. And then taking that experience and making a difference in a company, in an entrepreneur's life, in a company's life, is what excites me. This is what my biggest thing is. And then all the technologies, the new developments that happen, I just love it. It's like I feel like I'm just getting started.
No, 100%. And, Mustafa, we're approaching the end of the podcast. I do really appreciate your time. And I want to ask you one last question. For whoever else might be watching this podcast right now, what's one piece of advice you'd leave with them?
If there is one thing that I've learned in my career is that careers do not move in straight lines. It's always something that you have to think about. They evolve. And if you stay curious, keep putting the work and stay open to change, the path tends to come together in ways you couldn't have planned yourself. And that's what I would say. Trust, have faith, and keep putting away.
Thank you very much. That's beautiful. And Mustafa, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, for sharing your journey, your growth. Truly is a testament of your character, going through several different industries, being adaptable throughout all of them. I really, really do appreciate your time.
You're most welcome, Ammar, and I have equally enjoyed this experience as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share.
No worries. No worries. And for the audience, if this episode inspired you or helps you in any manner, please share it with someone else who might be navigating their own leap, because sometimes the hardest move isn't necessarily leaving home, but rather it's redefining what success actually looks like once you do. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next episode.